whether it's ERC-4337 or some other smart contract wallet implementation, we've basically figured out how to make it so that you can do stuff without having to pay gas fees. Because, in the case of 4337, you could use Uniswap or you could use Aave or whatever it is. No gas fees.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Index podcast, where the three of us come together every couple of weeks to discuss the latest industry news, chart crimes, crypto data, and so on and so on. The three of us have a guest today, and that is Kofi, BundleBear, and the only crypto analyst who knows how to build a front end. I'm very happy to have you here, Kofi. And with me, of course, I also have my co-hosts, Denning, on-chain corgi at Flashbots, Hildobby, resident data house at Dragonfly, and I am Boxer, and I am the community powers at Dune. Before we get into it, nothing we say here should be relied upon as legal, financial, investment, tax, or even life advice. We are all acting independently of our professional roles. With that, hello, Kofi.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Very happy to have Kofi here. And today we're going to talk about account abstraction and specifically ERC-4337. Kofi has built a great website on this, which is called BundleBear.com. BundleBear.com. You actually got the .com domain. Congratulations. So maybe as a high level overview, and I always love to do this, where I just ask everyone, and like also the people here that don't know what is ERC-4337. So that'll be, maybe you go first. If you hear this buzzword, ERC-4337 or smart accounts.
So I think about it as a like UX change and how it improves potential onboarding for anyone involved to use apps under the hood without necessarily needing to know that crypto is necessary or part of the infra. And I think that's a huge unlock. I think generally the UX is pretty poor. Not everyone knows how to use MetaMask, and it's confusing, and you got to change and everything. Abstracting all this away makes a ton of sense, and this is what ERC-4337 kind of targets.
Okay, interesting insights. Denning, what comes to mind when you hear these buzzwords?
Yeah, similar to what Dobby said. My understanding is that like we when we rethink about why cryptos still don't have the mass adoption, some people think the UX is the big bottleneck. Like why you need everyone to understand what gas is and like deal with the crappy process of figuring out how to put the code, like understand the call data in MetaMask. So like account abstraction supposedly is to let user just sign a transaction or just don't worry about everything and let the other people, I guess supposedly bundlers, to figure out what would be the optimal way to execute and settle things. And I believe there is a few different proposals besides ERC-4337. I would be curious to learn more about them today.
All right, great first insights. I think for me it's like I can only like kind of speak on the level of you two as well, where it's like it somehow improves UX. There's bundlers, paymasters, I don't know. There's like a bunch of stuff which supposedly makes UX better. But all that I'm seeing is like devs building for devs. Like it's like, oh, we have like intent-based architecture aggregation. It's like all of this like infrastructure builders building for other infrastructure builders, and like in the end there's like 5 app devs who are like, oh, there's like a lot of great tooling here. So like as these things always play out in the industry, I think Dobby and Mika are coming fresh from ECC, which was also like a lot of like intense smart accounts. A lot of people are kind of cooking with these new paradigms. But there already is things in production, and Kofi has analyzed the data. But first of all, Kofi, if you can kind of walk us through like what even is ERC-4337, and then I'm sure we're gonna have questions if you just go on a riff here.
I think a good place to start is just like talking about what the goal is with all of that account abstraction stuff. I mean, you guys hit on the most important things, which are that using a regular EOA wallet can be pretty complicated for people. And the whole point of account abstraction is that like, hey, let's abstract away some of the complexity of managing your own wallet by giving you a wallet that's actually a smart contract. So it can be like programmed to do all sorts of stuff that makes your life easier. And like, this is an idea that's been around for a while, right? So like since Ethereum started, people have been like, we should work on wallets that are smart contracts so we can make them do cool things. And I mean, the first and still the most popular example of that is the Safe wallet, sort of introducing, the whole idea of a multi-sig, like, oh, to make a transaction, multiple of us have to sign. This is safer this way. And, they kind of sort of really pioneered this idea of let's use wallets that are actually smart contracts. And then later on, you have people trying out their own implementations. I think maybe dApp started doing their own version of a smart contract wallet around 2020 or something like that, when their sort of automation that they were bringing was let's allow you to bundle some complex DeFi action into one transaction. So move your LP from here into there, but you just have to click once. And that was kind of a way of making the experience better. But I think that similar to sort of like NFTs in 2017, after a while of seeing all of these implementations, you kind of start to think that maybe there should be a standard, because if everybody is working on their own version of a smart contract wallet and all those versions work completely differently, then you don't really get a sort of a network effect of like, hey, what if we were all using the same version? Then somebody could write an app that would work with all of the versions, or like, we can all collaborate on, one path that is compatible with everyone. And you kind of get a lot of value out of that, same way that before ERC 721 came out, people were just making different versions of NFTs that work completely differently, and you would never have been able to make one NFT marketplace that worked with all of them, because they're just doing their own stuff. Then you make a standard, now everybody's the same, and you can start to all build on top of the same platform. So there have been plans for a while of like, oh, let's make a standard for smart contract wallets or for account abstraction. And there's been a lot of proposals that went through the whole proposal process and never really gained traction, never really happened. And 4337 is the first standard for this that like really sort of made it like past the finish line to production and is currently being used. I mean, it's like all it really does is that it bundles together a good few sort of features that already existed in past smart contract wallets. So the main ones being that there are paymaster contracts that let apps sponsor the user's gas fees for them. So when I make a transaction, I don't need to pay the gas. The app pays the gas for me. I mean, this is stuff that existed before. Other people have done versions of this, but it's just, doing it now in this standard. Or sort of the idea that, with a 4337 wallet, you could do the validation with a seed phrase, but you could also do the validation with some other verification method, like, I don't know, whether it's like pass keys on your device or like the secure enclave on your iPhone, so you can sign with your iPhone sign-in or whatever. And, just also having the idea of, instead of you actually yourself executing the transaction, there's a bundler that takes a bunch of different transactions and bundles them together. Again, existed before, but these are all things that like somebody had done this, somebody had done that, somebody had done this other thing. This is one standard that brings it all together. So everybody who uses the standard can benefit from those. Can benefit from those ideas. Kind of main building blocks, if we want to break it down, of like what's the ingredients of a 437 wallet transaction, is that you've got your smart contract wallet and you make these transactions, but they call them user operations. I feel like the Ethereum community in general is very bad with naming and branding, because a user operation doesn't mean anything to me. I feel like they could have come up with like a snappier name than that. But you have your wallet or whatever that's made for you. You make a transaction, except that it's called a user operation. And you have this other class of actors called bundlers that take a bunch of user operations and bundle them into a transaction that gets executed with a special contract on mainnet called an entry point contract. What the entry point does is that it looks at all the user ops in the bundle, and it first does a verification step, like, are these valid transactions? Is the nonce correct? Was enough gas paid or whatever? Does verification, and then it does execution. So that's sort of the step process. You have a wallet, you make a user op, the bundler takes it as well as a bunch of other people's user ops, and then executes it with using the entry point contract, and now your transaction is on chain. It's now been like a year, 6 months or something like that since the standard went live and different teams started building stuff on top of it. And it's been things going down. It's been interesting to see.
I think I got most of this, but I think it would be just to actually go down to the tech level a bit more, or like to make it more plastic. It's like I'm gonna say something and you tell me if it's correct. Like let's say I want to send Dobby 20 DAI, and then like in the usual case, I like basic construct call data. I call the DAI contract, and like the DAI like some like mempool picks that up, and like or like I send it into a mempool, and like eventually it will be included in a block. And like the same operate, and like I actually sign the transaction. Like I have call data that like goes to like I send the transaction to the DAI smart contract. And then with the whole kind of like bundler ERC-4337 architecture, basically what I do is I just sign a message, which is like the intent. And like I think that's where like the language gets kind of hairy here. Like, is this an intent, or like what are we doing here? But like I basically say like I want to send 20 DAI to Dobby, and like however that like arrives at the bundler and finally gets executed is kind of like in the bundler's hands. But like I guess I have some kind of proof, or like it's only like how does it, like can you help me of like what am I actually signing? Like, do I sign the intent? Do I sign an end state? Like, what's the thing?
Similar in the way to when you make a transaction, you give your signature, and then in the call data is all of the instructions to the, whether it's a smart contract you're calling or whether you're transferring some ETH. The user operation in this case contains all of that. So it contains the data of what exactly you want that transaction to do, and it also contains your signature. And that user operation is what gets sent to a bundler. Now, in the original sort of standard, there was a big idea around first the user operations would go into a whole new user operation mempool and get picked up by bundlers from there. In reality, that separate mempool doesn't exist yet. Like, it's still on testnet, it's still being developed. So right now it's all private order flow. Like, you make a user operation, it goes straight to the bundler, and then the bundler is executing it with the entry point contract that I mentioned before. In terms of the proof that you get, again, probably some gigabrain out there is going to like come back and complain about me saying this later, but you don't actually like get return the proof. It's kind of like you just send the user up, the bundler tries to execute it in a bundle, and like either it fails or it doesn't fail, and you sort of see what happens with that. But yeah, I think that you got the main idea there.
It feels quite similar to how the block builder is like simulating the bundles or transactions from the mempool, and then like try to build a block, and if it fails, then the transaction will not be included on chain. So sounds like 4337 also has some revert protection similar to how the the block builders running it today.
All the kind of protection that exists sort of in the form of validation that happens on the entry point contract. So if there's, I don't know, the same user operation has been sent twice, the second one is invalid, it will just fail. There's a whole sort of conversation that's going on around how to deal with sort of reverted transactions, because obviously, like, well, it's not obvious actually. If a bundler tries to make a bundle, and even one of the user operations in that bundle isn't valid, the entire transaction will get reverted, and like bundlers can lose a lot of money on failed transactions that way. So there's a whole conversation around, well, I mean, I guess probably bundlers should be maybe working directly with builders, or they should be using some Flashbots tool or something like that to make sure that if they try and make a bundle and that bundle is invalid, they don't lose money on gas fees doing that. there's a whole chart on my dashboard on BundleBear that tracks how many what's the word? How many bundles fail because of like say front running or some reason like that, and sometimes there are spikes, and sometimes the bundlers lose cash, and it's a whole thing.
Possibly very common. There are like conflicts of bundles, as in like some different bundlers picked up the same transaction or user op from the mempool, and then they included in their bundle together. Some other bundle got included first, and now they're announced is invalid, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's like you're saying, the two bundlers picked up the same user up from the mempool, or whether it's that like there was some mistake on the app or whatever, and the same user operation got sent twice, you know. Or maybe there's like some bundler that's like watching the normal mempool and sees a bundle coming in and just like replicates that bundle and submits it like faster to earn the user op fees. Because I mean, one of the ways that bundlers make money is that when you make a user op, you pay a fee for that, or it's sponsored by the app. Could also be sponsored by the app, and then that is what reimburses the bundler for spending, kind of gas fees on chain when it makes its transaction. And if they've designed things well, then they make a little bit of a profit in between what they get paid for all of the user ops in the bundle and what they actually spend for making the transaction that goes on chain. So yeah, there's all sorts of race games that could kind of come into play if things aren't designed well.
In terms of fees, so you said there's a profit to be made from the bundler side. Is it from a user's perspective? I would imagine that getting your transaction bundled rather than like one by one should be generally a bit cheaper. Does it make up, or do I expect that my transaction made through like account abstraction or smart account have been like, should I expect them to be generally cheaper, the same price? What are my assumptions in terms of fees compared to normal transactions? Do you have any idea there?
So again, this comes down to like there's a thing of, ideally, like on paper, how we'd like it to work, and then how it's actually working in reality now.
Yeah.
On paper, in theory, should be cheaper because, in an ideal world, a bundler is getting like, tons of user ops a second for it to bundle. And so like when it's making one transaction and there's like, I don't know, a dozen user ops inside of that transaction. And so like every one of those, user ops has to pay a lower fee than what it would have had to pay if it was just in a transaction by itself. And yeah, in that way, like bundlers can make a little bit of profit, but it's still cheaper for the user because their stuff is getting packed with a bunch of other people's stuff. In reality, there's like so little 4337 activity going on now that like most bundles really only contain one user op, or like if they contain many, they only contain like a small number of user ops. So you're not really saving that much money because the bundle isn't packed. It's just like if there's only one user op in the bundle, then you're basically paying the transaction fee plus a small premium. Like you're not like saving money on this as a user. But it's kind of like future site. If everything works out well and there's more activity, then it will be cheaper for people.
Makes me think that like maybe like app specific chains with account abstraction could benefit from like having large bundles and having a chain almost entirely focus on those bundles. I don't know. It's probably a very, very slim margin. I have no idea. I'm guessing it's fairly slim, but maybe, when you have huge size of bundles, it does make a difference. I don't know. It's just something you got me thinking with the whole fee structure you explained earlier.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to see if somebody does an experiment where like, there's some OP rollup or something where all of the transactions, like everybody's wallet is a 4337 wallet and the sequencer is actually the bundler. And then, it becomes a whole thing. It's just like all the transactions on the network are smart contract wallet transactions that use 4337. It could be interesting to do, but then somebody would probably also say, well, if you're doing that, maybe just you could even like skip some of these steps and just have native account abstraction, which is something that we hadn't talked about. There are some rollups in some chains like for instance, Starknet and ZK Sync, that, instead of using the 4337 standard or using some other standard, they have it like baked into their system that like all of the wallets are by default smart contract wallets, and they have their own special customized implementation for that. And it's something that they've been doing for a while, which it can have its own advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see if there are any more sort of experiments with new rollups that try and like see, maybe making 4337 a bigger deal in the design of the rollup, or maybe doing their own customized native account abstraction thing, or just doing whatever they want. I mean, generally, I feel like one of the disappointing things about rollups at the moment is that I feel like there should be more rollups doing like weird stuff as opposed to just being, EVM again. Is just like, hey, it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. And there aren't that many people that are really doing like wild and different things,
I think that's a hot take. Sounds like this breaks composability a lot, and a lot of other people have to suffer thereafter. But yeah, I guess like differentiation between all of these EVM chains is pretty low. I think this was a pretty good overview, but maybe if we could just quickly work out like what actually changes from a user perspective. Like we've used all these like very technical terms. So maybe if you have an example of like an app that uses account abstraction and like what like we basically save in terms of like user experience, or like how the user experience improves, that would be great.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, first I'll like sort of give like a general pitch of the user experience side of things, and then I'll talk about some example. I think that for me, the general pitch, like you don't care about the technical stuff, you just want to use a wallet. Like, why should you care about this? Is that, I mean, the sort of world of crypto that we have now, the apps that get you to use the most are centralized exchanges, right? Like any centralized exchange has way more users than your favorite on-chain app that's being shilled on crypto Twitter. And if you look at it, if you kind of ask the question of like, why do people use centralized exchange? Like, why are they way more successful and way more popular? There's a few reasons, but UX-wise, on the UX side of things, not talking about marketing or whatever, the main advantages of using a centralized exchange over using a dApp is that, you don't need to worry about gas fees. You just show up, you just click things in the app, shit happens. Who cares? Transaction fees are not even in your radar. You don't need to worry about those. You don't need to worry about storing a 12-word seed phrase, and if you lose the seed phrase, then you lose all your money. You just sign in like you would any other website. Most people know how to enter email and password. It's fine. It's easy. As a form of verification, it's no trouble at all. When you click a button in a centralized exchange, maybe there's a bunch of processes happening in the background, but you don't need to worry about that. You just click trade, click buy, click whatever. If there's more steps to do, they don't bother you with that information. It all happens in the background. And then, of course, there's the very important thing of being able to go from fiat to crypto really, really quickly and really easily. Of the four things that I've mentioned, account abstraction doesn't solve the last one. It doesn't help you get US dollars into ETH or whatever. But the other three it can help with in terms of like, the first thing that I was talking about was gas fees, right? If you use, whether it's ERC-4337 or some other smart contract wallet implementation, we've basically figured out how to make it so that you can do stuff without having to pay gas fees, because in the case of 4337, an app can put money in the paymaster to pay your fees for you. So you could use Uniswap, or you could use, any Aave or whatever it is, no gas fees. So that's one improvement for you. You just do stuff, no gas fees. We know pretty much how to make 4337 wallets that use forms of verification that aren't seed phrases. So that means that like when you create your wallet, instead of having to write down 12 words, and then if you forget them, you're fucked, you could have verification in the form of like a passkey that's saved on your device. So as long as you have your laptop, the passkey saved on your laptop, you can just sign with that. And you don't need to worry about anything, or everybody knows how to sign into your phone, just thumbprint or face verification or whatever. There's the P256 verification that's used on iPhones and on Android. People have figured out how to use that type of verification in a smart contract wallet. So there's an app called Dymo. That's like one of these new wallets that's using ERC-4337 that has that sort of verification system in there. So you could just make a wallet and sign into it using your iPhone. So just thumbprint or whatever, and you're in. So the sign in is easy. And the third thing of like being able to make fairly complex operations but not have to worry about all the steps, we also know how to do that. I mean, if you have a 4337 wallet, you could maybe go to a DEX, click one button and trade, and there has to be an approval of the token and there has to be like a swap, but that can all get, those multiple user operations of approve and swap and whatever can be bundled into one transaction, and you don't need to really worry about that too much. So those three main UX things, the gas, the verification that isn't a seed phrase, and the sort of bundling complex operations into one, transaction, those are the three main sort of UX benefits. And what you end up with is that you can build an app like Demo, the app that I was talking about, where somebody downloads an iPhone app, they just make a wallet, sign in with their thumbprint, and they just click one button to send USDC, and the USDC gets sent, and they don't need to sort of worry about a lot of the complexity in the background. It works almost as if they'd used Venmo. Basically, pretty much it's the same as if they'd used Venmo. I've never used Venmo because I'm not American, but like I'm just like basing off my idea of what Venmo is like. But yeah, it's just opening apps and like having the experience that's like a fintech app, Monzo or Revolut, or opening a game and having it's just the experience of a normal game, but you still have custody of your funds, which I think is sort of the important caveat here, because somebody listening to this might say, hey, I have a NeoWay wallet. I've heard of some solution or other that lets me do these things. And it's just like, there are solutions that could help you do some of this. But in most of those cases, those only work if you're handing your keys over to some third party or you're handing your funds over to some third party. Whereas in this scenario, you still own the wallet, you still own your keys, but you can do all of this stuff that you'd normally only be able to do on a centralized app. So yeah, play your game where you earn an NFT of the item or whatever, and it just shows up in the thing, and you don't need to worry about gas. You don't need to worry about how it works in the background. You don't need to sign in with the seed phrase, and that would be why it's better for you.
I'm really impressed that you were able to break it down like this so efficiently. I think the Revolut example resonates with like most of the global audience. I think like Revolut is pretty much in every country. And then if you think about like Revolut actually has like all of the different features where there's like a DEX in there. Like Revolut sent me a push message yesterday, which is like get up to $50,000 in loans, and I'm like, what? Why are you guys trying to like get me into debt? What is happening? But yeah, they have all of these features. They even have like crypto trading, stock trading. Like at least in Germany, it's like a super like feature rich app, and I think in the UK it's like very similar. So yeah, and I think like the main I think, as you rightfully pointed out, it's like the custody still sits within yourself if you were to actually build like a ERC-4337 Revolut, because you still need to sign something, and the signing could just be like you like actually pressing a button in your app. But for that you need to be signed in, and like only you actually have like this part of the key that is able to actually like sign this transaction, and like you have custody of those funds, even though it sits in the smart account. And like depending on the app, like if we were to imagine like somebody comes out with a, I don't know, like there's this weird hamster game on Telegram at the moment, or like maybe that's not the best. Let's just say the weird hamster game on Telegram. Maybe the like whoever develops that app would add like an account recovery thing, but then like that's an explicit kind of like thing that you kind of sign into or like you agree to, whereas today it's basically the default. Like there's no way, like you can have an account on a platform and they don't know how to reset your password. Like usually there's flows built into this. I think in some extreme cases of like Proton Mail and like if you had two-factor authentication and like all of this stuff, they might not, but like even then it's like Kraken will be able to, like if I like lose everything of my Kraken account, like they would still be able to reset my password. It's still in their custody, so like they can still move stuff. So yeah, that put aside, I think I think we've covered the like, what is this? What would this mean for users? So now if we can actually kind of dive into the adoption, I think that's a great segue. Now we've gone through what is ERC-4337. What does this actually mean for users? How could this user look like in practice? And as we're all like we're data podcast here, so like it took a while to actually get to the meaty data. But I think it would be interesting, and maybe I'll share my screen first, and we can kind of look at a bit of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So if you open up the site, you'll be able to see these big numbers at the top. It looks pretty impressive that in the sort of year, 6 months since the standard went live, more than 9 million accounts have been deployed. So each of these accounts is a smart contract. It needs to be deployed. And they've made tens of millions of user ops. Again, you can think of those pretty much as being transactions. And users have saved $3 million on what they would have spent in gas fees, apps sponsoring that fee instead using paymasters. And there are big numbers here of like, it's whatever. In this week in June, 700,000 accounts were active on Polygon. But then it kind of leads you to question, the numbers look good, but what are those people actually doing? So there's a page in here called Apps where you can go and check out basically when people are making these user ops, taking a look at the data inside of the user ops, you can see what smart contracts or what applications people are actually interacting with. And there's a leaderboard at the top with the top apps, and we can see week by week what people are using the most. So I think, maybe a good way to start would just be to talk about what are people using now, and then I can talk a little bit about what people have been using in the past. I mean, right now, the most popular apps of the week are Piggybox, Blocklords, and CyberConnect. Basically, what those are is Piggybox is, there's this sort of token farming app called Earnum, where people can like earn tokens by like completing random quests, like follow this project on Twitter or join this Discord or whatever, stuff like that. And if you sign up for Earnum, they give you like a free NFT called Piggybox. And basically there's a ton of user ops being created right now by people signing up to this app to farm, earn token, and then just being given this NFT, which is why you like see sort of the big numbers for Piggybox at the moment. Blocklords is some on-chain game. It's like some, I think, medieval style on-chain game where people like buy these characters that are NFTs, and they can send the character to do a mission or to do a duel or whatever. And it's an on-chain game, and that app uses 4337 wallets for the account. So when you sign up for the game, a wallet gets made for you to hold your NFTs and to make all of the on-chain transactions and stuff. CyberConnect has been around for a while. That's like it's one of these crypto social platforms where like everybody's profile on the platform is a smart contract wallet or a smart account. And CyberConnect was kind of a thing where most people were just sort of signing up to get the cyber airdrop. So it used to be like the most used app in the 437 space. Then after the airdrop, kind of fell off. And I think now they're pivoting into being an L2. Either way to say, there's like stuff that people are using. A trend that you will find is that a lot of the apps that are being used in the 4337 space right now aren't super inspiring. Like this is not like the greatest innovation of DeFi is being come up with, or something you never heard of before. There's a lot of apps where it's just like, oh, people are using this app to farm this token, or people are using this app to farm this NFT. And yeah, there's quite a lot of that if we look at the leaderboard. Fan TV is an app where people can like earn Fan TV token for watching videos. So it's like watch to earn. AnyChess was like a collaboration between Animoca brands and chess.com. It's like a new site where you play chess games and you can earn NFTs. Uh, G1 is the token of a Telegram trading bot. So actually, you, I think people are mostly using that bot to farm the G1 token. But yeah, this is the sort of stuff that people are doing at the moment, and what is creating all of those big numbers that we saw on the front end there.
Yep, that's a great overview. I guess that's kind of like to be expected. It's like to go all like high, or like how do you say this? To have like too high expectations of like, oh, this needs to be something noble and groundbreaking that needs to be built. It's like, no, like this actually like opens the door to the masses. Like, did everyone of the like Animoca brand chess game even know that they were doing some crypto stuff in the back end? Maybe. I have not gone through the experience of myself, but there's a possibility where you can actually like completely abstract it away, and it's just like, oh, like I'm just getting like, I don't know, quest rewards, like you get Steam achievements or whatever, without knowing that you're actually using crypto in the background. So like that's pretty cool. I like it. Even though of course there's farming as always, not very pretty. And then if we just look at the high numbers, it seems like there is 9 million accounts and only 30 million transactions. So it's like the retention of the like created accounts is actually like horrible. And I think you even have a retention chart somewhere.
Oh yeah, at the bottom of the page, you can kind of see the retention sort of. So if somebody first started using their account in the week of 29th April, if you go forward 7 weeks, there's only like 1% of the people who like started becoming active in this week are still active in week 7. The retention is quite bad. There's a lot of activity that is along the lines of people signed up for this thing because maybe airdrop, and then they just didn't use that thing again. There's like a lot of activity that is geared towards that. I mean, so an interesting thing is that I recently, like maybe earlier this week, put out like a half-year report for BundleBear looking at that question of how many people are actually heavy users versus light users. So what you're seeing in this chart right here is I'm breaking down the accounts that are active every month based on how many of them only make like one user up a month versus like 2 to 10 versus more than 10. And you can see that like more than 90% of the ERC-4337 wallets that are active are just like pretty light users, pretty one-off people who will just maybe make one user operation, you can call it one transaction in a month. And there's only a very small number of folk who actually are using that account or using that wallet multiple times a month. And there's an interesting sort of change when you look at which apps are being used by the heavy users versus the light users. So AnyChess, which I kind of just pulled up there, I've never played it. I'm not really interested in chess, but there's a lot of heavy users on AnyChess, I guess because you'd play a bunch of chess games in order to get more NFTs. And so they're using their wallets very active. But if you look at the light users, most of the light users, the people who make just one user up a month, are people maybe who are using something like the Earnum Piggy Box thing I was talking about, where you're signing up to this app to farm some token and you just sign up and get an NFT. Or again, CyberConnect, you just sign up because there might be an airdrop and then you don't really do anything with that account again. So yeah, there's most of the usage is very, low retention usage, but there are also some apps that like have higher retention and are really trying to, get people coming back more and more often.
I have a question, and maybe excuses this maybe out of ignorance, but wouldn't also stuff like Privy and all the like social fi sector or whatever you see as this? There's a lot of it that uses account abstraction through Privy. is Privy not using 4337 or not at all? Is that not the case? Is it a
No.
different type of account abstraction?
Yeah, so Privy, like you said, very popular, tons of apps using that. Privy doesn't use 4337. I think it's possible to use 4337 together with Privy. They have like some tutorial if you want to do that. But I think that most apps that use Privy are using like the sort of the default system, which is basically, I think how it works is that basically Privy is holding your private key for you. Like when you sign up for an app,
Yeah.
it just makes a wallet for you, and Privy just holds your private keys, and then you can sign stuff or whatever. But it's like it's the trade-off that we were talking about before of like Privy gives you all of the UX benefits that we were a lot of the UX benefits that we were talking about in terms of making it easy for users, making it easy for developers. But then it's sort of like, well, somebody else is holding your keys. And
Yeah, it's a
for
higher
some
trusted
people that might
substance.
not be like this, yeah, that's a high degree of trust
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
don't know, yeah, having a
I'm
scenario
not
where
I'm
that's
not quite sure how the Privy sandbox or like the Privy toolkit works, but I think you still like for Frentech, for example, I think your Twitter login basically becomes part of the private key. So like you can't fully like I don't think Privy actually has the full key, but I think like the main difference here is like on Privy you still have a wallet, and like with account abstraction you don't
Yeah. Yeah.
technically have a wallet, like you don't sign the actual call data and all of that stuff. Where like in Frentech like you'd always have to do like the proof and then the buy if you actually wanted to trade your friend, or like it was all some monolithic contract. But like you can imagine if you wanted to do something in a Privy wallet, you would still go through the like wallet user flows, and you would actually like send like call data to some smart contract instead of sending a user up to a bundler, which is like that abstracts away like most of the complexity. So like basically all that Privy does is like, I think Kofi's second point before, where it's like you don't need to like keep your 12 seed phrase word before, and like that's what gets abstracted away, and the rest is basically like the old like Ethereum UX, and like still in the MetaMask era of like you need to like sign some complicated call data and nobody really knows what's happening. Whereas 4337 hopefully is just like I'm depositing $100 into my bank account, and like I can clear, like there's no bytecode, there's no like complexities. It's just like this is actually what's gonna happen, and I signed that.
Yeah, I think like account abstraction, like smart accounts, are more of a spectrum than like one only for 4337. And maybe there's different types of account abstraction that cater to different people. I mean, I would be down to be in custody of my wallet, but I would assume the vast majority is also down and not within the, is happy to have it custodied by someone else. So it's just different style for different people, and I think it'd be really cool actually to look at the stats of how each of these different style of account abstraction kind of compare to one another in usage and just in different trust assumptions, and quantifying all this would be super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. There's like you said, it's a spectrum. There's different people doing different things in the account abstraction space, with different levels of security, different levels of UX, different features. Even I mean, you've got the native account abstraction people who have like, oh, the entire chain or the entire L2 is like has this technology. You have people using Safe, which is great for a lot of things, but is best known for having really good multi-sig, really good being able to uh, change your keys if you like want to be able to re-roll your key. You know, you've got people doing sort of privy type stuff, which is more of like wallet as a service than usually what people would think of as account abstraction. But hey, some of the benefits are similar. You've got ERC-4337. There are people doing different stuff, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, right now, a lot of people who are kind of betting on ERC-437 are hoping that most of this wallet innovation activity is going to like funnel into 4337, and everybody's just going to fall in line, and we're all just going to use this one standard and just try and make it as best as we can together. And there are some people who hate 4337 and are like, oh, I don't like this standard at all. I want to do it my own way because I have my own ideas that I think are better than this design implementation. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the sort of thing I'll leave up to the people who actually make stuff. I'm just gonna be making charts, seeing how like the numbers turn out.
Yeah, we've covered the app and the user side now. One thing that I think is also interesting is like the bundler landscape here, where it's kind of like you can draw parallels to solvers in the CalSwap system or something like this.
I'm sorry, I have some questions to follow up for the applications. Yeah, sorry. So I wanted to comment, like from the first landing page when we were looking at the first charts, I was looking at the comparison where it was like, oh, for Polygon there was like so many accounts. They apparently are dominant in terms of like the market share of the smart accounts. But then when you look at the charts on the right side, the user ops like instantly base become a bigger thing. And initially my reaction was like, oh, maybe that means Polygon's users are most like farming, and like maybe base interaction is more organic. But then later when we went to the apps page, where we saw that like the top apps, I looked into the per chain category. Apparently the piggy box one was on Polygon. So which, yes, like most people are just like coming to do a thing and then leave and potentially farming things. And the one on base was actually the one you talked about, like the gaming, the block lords. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're like more organic. It's just like different type of interaction of apps can like have different data pattern, I guess. So that was an interesting call out. Another actually question is like, have you seen many DEX or like DEX trading type of application that can adopt 4337? And if not, I wonder like what are the changes a application needs to make to actually integrate 4337? Maybe we don't get an answer. Maybe that's an answer question for the app developers. But I wonder if you know anything about this.
Yeah, I mean, on your first thing, I think you made a really great point about different chains having different sort of value of users, because there's a lot more accounts using Polygon, as you said, but the accounts on base are more active. So I think in this report, I actually did find that when I broke it down by chain, most of the heavy users, so the people who use their account multiple times a month, most of the heavy users are on base, and most of the light users, the people who only do one-off stuff, are on Polygon. Like you said, that comes down to the apps that they're using. So maybe on base, there are more 4337 related apps that the behavior is you use it more often because it's a game or whatever. In terms of if you're an app developer and you want to start using this stuff, I mean, right now, Florian was just about to talk about bundlers. There's like a lot of sort of 4337 wallet as a service type providers out there who will happily show you the SDK that makes it really easy to add embedded smart accounts into your app so that people can just sign in and they just get an account given to them. uh, and that's like a whole sort of like battle landscape of startups that are trying to get people to use their service as opposed to like their competitor service and all that.
I see. I see. So I guess it's like in terms of how the data look like, it's not really like the how to say DEX router needs to do anything. It's more like, okay, use this smart wallet, and then they're gonna call the router or whatever like on top of it as a wrapper.
As you're saying, it could be that you are an app that runs a DEX, like, let's just say Uniswap or whatever. Uniswap could wake up tomorrow and they could be like, hey, we want people to just be able to sign in and get given a 437 smart account. So we're either going to do our own thing or use some SDK and give people the option to just sign in. They get a smart account given to them, and then they can fund that account and trade on it. Or you could have somebody who makes more like what we would think of as a normal wallet app, like a Rainbow or whatever, that happens to use smart accounts, or like the new Coinbase smart wallet thing that happens to use smart accounts. And it's just like people would be making user ops that happen to interact with Uniswap or whatever. Like Uniswap routers, the contract being called in the user op, but they don't really need to worry about that so much. They just click a swap button and a user op that says swap is getting sent to some bundler and getting processed. There isn't really a lot of DEX activity in the 4337 space right now. It's mostly apps that are somebody's farming a token, or maybe it's a game, or maybe it's a crypto social thing. But there hasn't really been a lot of like DEX activity so far.
Yeah, my last question was like when I was looking at your rank of all the applications, and I was like naturally thinking, oh, how is this data created? And in the back of my head, I was like, usually when you categorize the application using on-chain data, you just like basically group by the two addresses. Maybe this is like a very data nerds conversation, but like I'm curious like how the data look differently for like 4337 data. So like for example, like the app's information is probably no longer from the two addresses. I would imagine the two addresses is actually like either bundler or paymaster or.
It's the entry point contract in this case, and the from address would be the bundler. So if you look at the transaction, it just looks like bundler made a transaction to entry point contract. And so yeah, to very briefly like go into the data nerd side of things, what you can do is that you can look at there's like a when the bundler makes transactions with the entry point, there's a specific function call called like handle ops, and it's like the function call for handling a user op. And every user op that gets handled in a transaction will have a handle op call, and you can look at that and you can see information about the user op. So what was the account that sent this user op? If there was a paymaster used, what paymaster was used? If there was what bundler was used, and also some data around what's the word? What you can think of it as the call data of the user op, and again you can look into that to see like what function selector was used and what contract was called and all of that. So I mean, I'm just pulling up my own like internal Dune spell DBT type thing here to show you a little bit of what this looks like. But it's basically, for people who are just listening, I'm pulling up on, you would be able to see it on YouTube, sort of my internal code base. And what I'm showing is that if, for instance, you wanted to see what contract was being called by user up on Arbitrum, you would go to Arbitrum traces and you would look at handle up calls to the entry point contract on Arbitrum. And inside of that function call, you can see like information inside of if you decode the input data or whatever, you can see information about what was the hash of this user op, who was the sender, who was the paymaster, what was the call data. And the call data will contain stuff about what contract was being called, whether that's some game contract or Uniswap or USDC, and like, what the function selector of that was. But yeah, it's that's basically what I do to be able to figure out this user up was using this app versus this app on whatever, and I just have a bunch of manually made labels to compare the contract that was called to my own registry of what apps these are, or like what apps those contracts belong to. It's a long-winded way of saying it, but yeah, that's how it works at the moment.
Yeah, super interesting stuff to also look behind the scenes. I'm still like I think the comments on like why doesn't any DEX use this, and my mind especially jumps to these Telegram bots. Like why, like these Telegram bots currently hold your private keys, and it's just like trust me, bro. And I guess like with Unibot you have kind of the token value as a. I mean, there's no like security, but like the devs are incentivized to not rug their own token. So like I don't know. Then do like you're the DEX expert. Do you know of any team that's like at least working on this? Have you chatted to Banana Gun or someone?
Yeah. I think like generally the normal decks don't use it. It's just simply because right now, as Kofi said, it's like one bundle, one transaction, and it's not very gas efficient. And I think like similarly using permit two is and meta transaction, decks can kind of achieve this goal already. Like where you just sign the transaction and then they can have someone who submit a transaction for you. So yeah, I don't know what's the detailed comparison between that and the 4337, but I think gas might be the biggest barrier for them to adopt for now. And Telegram bots, I mean, I think they don't need they don't really need to use 4337 if they already have your private key. They can just submit transactions on behalf of you and everything. But I did feel like I think Telegram bots who I talked to, Banana Gun was saying like, yeah, in the longer term, in the ultimate, like end game, they would want to use something like account abstraction to remove the trust assumption to be like really legitimate and stuff. I don't know if that will happen anytime soon, but yeah.
What it comes down to is that I feel like there's an incentives thing here of like, if you're a big DEX team, why are you going to spend the next 6 months working to implement some smart account, UX solution or whatever? Like you already have, I mean, if you're Uniswap, you already have a bajillion people using your app, and you're working on your mobile app and you're working on your L2. It's just like you've got other things going on, and it's not really like this isn't really your priority. Maybe if you were a completely new startup and you were like maybe focusing on how do I differentiate myself from the existing big players, I want to like improve my UX somewhat. Maybe you might look into this more the same way that last year SocialFi apps were looking into using Privy and using other things so that they could like be better. I think it's like enough of an effort that I think what will end up happening is that the apps that get really big using 437 will be new apps that are starting from scratch and don't have a lot of tech debt compared to like some big team that already has a product that a bunch of people are using. And how many like product managers are you going to have to convince to be like, hey guys, let's know what we're doing now and let's make this all smart account compatible and like do a whole other UX flow and do all this other stuff. It's just like, who's going to buy into that?
Hopefully the product manager actually comes up with the idea. Like that would be amazing.
Hopefully.
But I think we need to differentiate here between like the DEXs, like the DEX protocol builders, people like Uniswap, which are like, I mean, they're like kind of full stack. They have a front end, they have a wallet, but like all of this stuff, but it's like different teams within that organization. I think the Uniswap wallet team is probably looking at ERC-4337 and they probably think it's interesting because you can abstract away like the complexity and the same like you're not gonna have the curve core dev team like looking at this, but like the aggregators, the 1inches and the matchas and like those teams, they probably look at ERC-4337. And I think even for like perp dexes, the like hyperliquids and the dydxs and like all of these like different teams, they're probably all looking at this just because like user experience is actually like genuinely really important for them. So like they can provide an experience that's like eating away at the like centralized exchanges market share. So yeah, exciting things. I think like one more thing maybe that's interesting is like kind of this cow swap solver architecture. And like if we ever get to like a bundler like competition landscape where it's like not all just like private order flow, but rather there's like an actual like competitive bundler, like those seem to kind of like converge. And like I see more and more like intent-based architecture kind of like fall on the things that where like the cow swap solver like network would actually be really interesting. So yeah, that's just something random that came to my mind. I think we've learned a lot about ERC-4337 here, and thank you for that, Kofi. I think I think just summarizing my everyone's takeaways is always an interesting kind of like end to a conversation. I think like the tech seems to be there. It seems to be like people can genuinely build something, and there's like Economy and Alchemy and Coinbase, they all have these SDKs. So like it's no longer kind of rocket science to actually implement this. Like we see like genuinely useful use cases immediately while talking about this, like Telegram bots, which just like hold your private key in custody, and just like, no, like you should just give me an ERC-4337 account and let me sign in with my iPhone or with my passkey or like with my Telegram account, even or something along those lines. It's like I think we all like see the utility of this tech, and like it's kind of strange that we haven't seen more adoption, but it seems like people are throwing spaghetti at the wall, and like we're seeing experiments, and like Daimo's doing great things, and like this Animoca chess game. Maybe I'll become a chess nerd now and like farm the NFTs. But cool, like interesting things are happening. It's kind of surprising to me that we're not seeing more adoption because like the like so many people are just stuck in MetaMask era of UX. And yeah, like how do we move them out of there? What's going to be exciting enough to actually get people to like onboard to a 4337 wallet? And yeah, maybe Denning, Hildobby, and then Kofi. If you want to give your summary, would be great.
I mean, yeah, I think it actually makes me quite bullish about like really like how like what would be an opportunity the crypto can be exposed to the mass adoption. Like, what if one day like Chase can put a smart contract wallet in like their normal banking accounts, and I think there just really needs to be a like a really big institute to adopt this, and yeah, it seems the future is bright.
Yeah, my point of view is that the tech is cool, and what we're missing is people working on apps rather than infra, and that's like that feels like the major takeaway from ETC as well last week, and all the talks is like infra is getting to a point where it's pretty solid, but like we probably need some stuff on top of it to make it all make sense. And there's a ton of things that make a lot of sense. I think you had like a in comparison to central exchanges and how we're slowly creeping to a UX that kind of compares to it and even is superior in ways with decentralization, trust assumptions, and everything. But we yet to see many teams really building hardcore on this. Maybe they are on the background and we're about to see some stuff. I hope so. But I wish we saw some more.
I mean, my like final takeaway would just be that yeah, there's a lot of potential to do interesting stuff, but yeah, it's still pretty early. I mean, it's important to remember that the 4337 standard only really went live maybe a year and a few months ago, and a lot of the startups building sort of SDKs for devs on top of this are pretty young. Even if maybe it's like a team inside of a team like Alchemy, they're pretty young and they've had to solve a lot of issues with their developer experience. There were a lot of bugs at first. There were a lot of, not well documented things. But I think, yeah, we're finally getting to the stage where, the tooling is actually good enough to make really cool stuff. And, right now it's a lot of like, maybe not so exciting apps using that tooling. But I think more and more over time, we'll start to see apps that are really exciting start to use the tooling.
As a final like end to this conversation, ERC-4337 is not even like finalized yet. It's not an official ERC. It's just like an alliance that has kind of formed around like we're just gonna like it takes too long to like actually get this done and like whatever. We're just gonna like go ahead and work with this. Which I guess is a way to shortcut, but also like kind of work around the social consensus. Interesting nevertheless, it seems to have enough adoption to like actually be a real ERC at one point. Like now there's like kind of so much critical mass. I'd be surprised to see if it like doesn't pass all the stages, but we'll see. With that, ERC-4337, I think we can make a check mark on. Kofi, you're also one of the biggest or like one of the most well-known freelance data science analysts. That's a weird like long word, but you basically what I'm trying to say is you're freelancing. You're not like employed like us plebs. We're the 9-to-5ers. You're the there's a great word for this. I forgot. But we're the 9-to-5ers. You're free. You're free man. And you posted on Twitter the other day that basically everyone is looking for data analysts, but they should like demand way outstrips the supply of good data analysts. And I thought like maybe you could quickly talk us through your experience of like how do you actually like I don't know how like detailed you want to go into like how your funding sources are, but like if you want to give us the high level of like what it is like to be a crypto freelance data analyst, that would I think that would be very insightful for many of our listeners.
But yeah, I made this tweet because, I mean, you guys will have noticed this, that we are in a lot of the same group chats. And usually people get requests from different teams to be like, hey, do you know somebody I can hire for this role or for this role data wise? And I mean, just in the past week or two, there have been like at least, 6 to 10 big teams, like folk with good brands with a lot of funding that are trying to find an analyst to join and that are maybe struggling a little bit to do it, which is cool. Well, not cool for them, but I guess it's cool for people who are learning crypto data analysis because it means that there are opportunities out there if you like train up and build a good portfolio and all of that. I mean, like you were saying, I work as a freelancer, which basically means that at any point in time, I'm usually working with one or two or three teams part time, with each of them doing different, stuff. Sometimes it will be like, oh, this will be a gig where I'm building a very particular product for a team. Like, we need a dashboard that does X, or we need some analysis of this specific thing, give it to us and we'll pay you. And with other teams, the relationship is more of like a rolling basis, sort of, put me on a retainer type thing of just pay me this amount a month, and whatever data requests you have, I'll just fulfill those data requests, as well as maybe building some longer term stuff to help you monitor. You have some big programs that are going on, or some big campaigns that are going on. I'll help you monitor those as well. And it's been cool. I've been working as a freelancer for how long now? Like a year and a half or something like that, a bit more than a year and a half. And it's nice sort of being able to work with different people, and, can make a little bit more money than you'd make full time if you're working for multiple people part time. And I can do stuff like, I'm going to take August off, planning to go on a trip with some university friends. And I just told the clients I'm working with at the moment that I'm just not going to be here in August, which might be harder to do if I was actually an employee. People just kind of accept it if you're part time with them. It's just like, I'm just not going to be here in August. I'll see you in September. You know what I mean?
It's very French of you. I just had to. It's like the entire country of France is closed in August.
Well, I mean, it's really amazing to say that like you work for a part. It's just really a chat move that you work for a part time for a year and a half, and then you bought your mom a car, right? I remember that tweet. It was a really nice thing to do of you. Yeah, but it just
Yeah, it was a good
says.
time. I had some saved up from all the gigs, and it was just like, yeah, do something nice. I mean, what's the point of? I mean, all of us have a pretty similar work life. I think of like we work evenings and weekends and holidays. And it's like, what's the point of doing all of that if you're not gonna do something nice with the money once in a while? You know?
I have some questions because there's different approaches to freelancing. I think one of them is the team reaches out to you or vice versa, and you do something, straight away with them directly. There's also more like public goods style of stuff that I think BundleBear is probably more in line with. And I see like the sponsors being like the EF and by Economy and Pimlico, the two of the biggest bundlers, I think, historically. How does that come to be? Is it like you start something and then eventually you ask for potential contributions from these entities, or is there some high level thing you can share for people who are looking to do some freelancing and are looking to potentially get into the space?
If somebody was starting with freelancing, there's two things to think about there. One, you were talking about how do you get customers, and then two is just kind of like what type of work are you doing versus the open source versus the closed source stuff. I think that in terms of like how you actually get people, there's like on the one side there are people who are doing marketing, and on the other side there are people who are doing sales. I think that for me, most of my customers come through marketing because I've spent the past 4 years or whatever posting a lot of crypto data stuff on Twitter to make a big Twitter account, and that's basically marketing. It means that like people who I don't know will have seen some of my stuff on Twitter, and then I get DMs from them when they like want a data thing, because it's just like, hey, I don't know that many crypto data people, but I see this guy posting a lot. It seems like he genuinely knows what he's talking about, so I'm just going to ask him. And so nowadays I get lot more stuff on the inbound side of things, and it's just a matter of sort of filtering that a little bit, because you're just one person, you don't have the time to work with everybody, and maybe some projects a bit shady, you don't want to work with them, so make some discretion there. On the other side is like, if you don't have a big Twitter account, it's perfectly fine because you can do sales. And sales is like the whole thing of, you make the list of teams that you want to work with, and you're cold messaging people, or like you're going to like in-person events and like, having nice chats with folk, like doing the networking thing to build relationships so that you can get that contract. Or nowadays, we're even seeing like a whole other side of sales with DAOs, right? Because all of these DAOs have like open forums where people can submit proposals, And I mean, there are teams, I mean, we know there are teams that have submitted proposals on DAO forums to get contracts of like millions of dollars worth of tokens to do work for different DAOs. And it's not that anybody on the team was particularly Twitter famous or something like that. They just came with their proposal and they like, proposed like, this is the work that we're going to do for you and this is how much we're going to get paid. And then they do some DAO politics, talking to the different delegates or whatever and get work that way. So it's sort of like, yeah, you can just kind of see whether you feel you're more of a marketing person or a salesperson and then lean into one of those two things to get customers, just being very serious about like, are you either you're making a lot of content and you're doing it consistently to market yourself, or you have like a plan for sales and you're just like grinding, talking to a lot of people, building a lot of relationships, doing a lot of proposals to like, increase your chances that way. In terms of the type of work that pays, most of the money that I make is through work that I do for people privately. Like the open source stuff is actually more marketing than it is income. Like stuff like I made a site recently for helping people see gas fees on different L2s or stuff like BundleBear doesn't make very. I think I have some sponsors on BundleBear, like you mentioned. Maybe those sponsorships bring in like, I don't know, like low hundreds of dollars a month, which is very nice, helps pay the rent, but it's not exactly like, hey guys, let's like rent a mansion in France or whatever with this money. Like it's not life-changing money. Most of the open source stuff is what helps people to know that you exist because you can post about it online and it's just like, oh, this is cool. We like that. It's like goodwill. Maybe people will retweet or whatever. And then that helps you to get private jobs that actually pay, but people will never really know most of the work that you do because most of the work that you do is in some private company account or private Dune account or whatever it is. And yeah, it's just like, there's different ways to do it, but it all just depends on what kind of person people are and the sort of the approach that they want to use and all that.
One thing that the four of us have now is this reach that you mentioned and have like some assumption of trust from maybe our followers and others who have seen our work a bunch. For those, if anyone's looking to go to freelancing, what I suggest is doing some work out in the open, sharing that. Maybe it's just analyzing a product, specific project, specific blockchain, having a sector you look at and sharing that with those specific teams. And maybe they would like it enough to actually pay you eventually, maybe as a sponsor or to hire you something. But there's this problem where right now we have, I feel like every week there's a new job with like quite high pay, but they're looking for like crazy experience that like 5 people in crypto have. And there's just like there's just no supply. And I think maybe like having teams push out more like bounties and stuff like this to incentivize maybe public work and having an easy onboarding for people who want to go into crypto data, maybe that would help facilitate this kind of supply of analyst issue. But yeah, and there's also tons of teams that don't necessarily need a full-time data analyst and should probably leverage the power of just blockchain and like having bounties on Bountycaster or something. That could go a long way. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I saw more of this freelancing for public goods as well. I think once you've established yourself, it makes sense to obviously do whatever you want, and you're kind of free to go and do a lot of things, which is super cool. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a problem I see, and I think all of us are in group chats where every once in a while we have, hey, this job is from Redacted is paying 300,000 base salary, and they're looking for someone with 10 years of experience. Although like there's been no analyst for basically 10 years in crypto. So I don't know. It's weird.
You make a good point about how like more teams should probably try and lean into the bounty stuff, not just to get work done, but also to like, if there isn't enough supply of data analysts who have 4 years experience, you kind of need to start incubating people or training people a little, like give people a chance who are beginners to do stuff for you, and then sort of filter over time and see who's really good and really active and like invest in those people, which is of course harder than just pay and just hire somebody who is already perfect immediately and will just do everything that you want. But like as we were talking about, that isn't really an option for most teams, because
Yeah.
most people like you guys who would be amazing team members already have a great job somewhere that they're not going to leave anytime soon. Or there are one or two people who, well, maybe a few more people than who are freelancers like me, but they're freelancers, they are booked up for a certain amount of time, maybe they're not available to work with you. Or we've got the elder giant class like Richard Chen and folk who are just, they won't do any work for you. They're on a completely different level. They're managing some multi-billion-dollar fund, or they're already too rich to like do this bounty that you have for $15,000 or whatever. Like you can't even get them even if you wanted to. And so, yeah, you got to, just sort of build relationships with new people and like help them become the next sort of big analysts and all of that.
And I have one last note is if you are a team and you see anyone building data or contributions, public goods in your sector, I think even reaching out to the people who build it and showing appreciation, or even a simple, it's not about like tipping or anything. Tipping is like a big plus. Like even showing that you recognize the work and appreciate it goes a long way, I think, for analysts, and helps those people maybe stay in the space more. Because it can be frustrating when you build it first and essentially it seems like not many give much of a shit about what you're doing, although it's not really true, but it's just not many are actively saying and voicing those things. So yeah, if you are like, if your data is on a dashboard and just pops up out of nowhere, like I think it's super cool. Like, you should encourage those people in some way.
I think there should be more tipping. Like I think it's
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
it's
that's like
treacherous. It's treacherous to like extract value from like the work that somebody else has done. Like obviously, like open source work, there's no expectation, but like I still remember like the first time somebody tipped me, and it's like there's like a magic moment where like, oh, I can actually earn money with this. Like this is really really cool. I think like a lot of, like I don't know, a lot of projects are like pretty cheap, and they're like, oh yeah, just somebody built this, and you like. I meet a lot of people at like conferences and stuff, and they're like just like, oh yeah, somebody built this, and I'm like, oh, did you like, was this a freelance? No, just some community member. Do you pay them? Oh no. It's like, what are you doing? Like this is like somebody spends like tens of hours to like work with your data. Like you obviously see the utility in this, and then you don't even like retroactively like tip them $500. Like is $500 really a lot for a team's treasury? Really? It's like it's just like not great behavior. But yeah, we'll see how that resolves. I think there was a good segment on freelancing. To all the analysts out there, there's demand. There's demand for the skill set, and like the skill set, like I think the demand for the skill set is only going to increase as time goes on, as more teams professionalize and actually need like in-house data scientists. Until then, like especially if you're kind of like between this, like I can actually build useful stuff. I know Dune, I know whatever Flipside, I know like Wrath. I can build with this stuff, but like people don't really see the value of my research yet. So like I have a hard time monetizing. I think it's just like that's actually the like I think that's like a really hard stage where like you just need to put in the hours, you just need to grind, you just need to build your following, build your network, or like go on the sales or the marketing journey, like Kofi says. And I think like one thing that I would always recommend is like specialize. Like people notice if you're just like jumping from topic to topic to topic, and you always like you kind of have an idea of what you're talking about, but not really, and like nobody cares about like the 100th analyst like talking about like the average, I don't know, transactions per second on base or something like this. It's like this is like find your market. Yeah, don't be cumulative charts, of course. But like find your niche, find your market. People pay more for like specialized expertise than just like you can do like a jack of all trades, especially in data, because like a lot of these problems are just solved already. It's like I can go to grow the pie to look at the average transactions per second on base. Like I don't need to I don't need a Dune dashboard for that, or I don't need you to like host a whole like ref whatever infrastructure on your computer for that. Like that's ridiculous. So yeah, I think that's my final take. Do you want to say something, Henning? You look.
Oh yeah. I just had another thought. I think like also a lot of people, actually from my recent chat with Kofi, I realized like a lot of people prefer to stay freelancing because of the inequality of pay across the global. Like for example, it's really expensive to hire like someone in Bay Area for like 200K or 300K is probably some standard for someone with like 5 to 10 years experience. But then imagine that money in like East Europe or like India or even Africa, right? And it's going to be like, what, like 30K is really good for a senior engineer. And then it's like when you are able to be paid for like, equally as a part-time gig as anyone else in the world, why you would choose to be a full-time and sort of super underpaid. And so I think that's one good thing that crypto is doing with freelancing is like, this decentralized distribute in a way, I think. Yeah.
I think this pretty much finishes up the episode. I don't think there's like particularly bad chart crimes in ERC-4337 land, since Kofi and a few of the teams themselves are the only people who have really only dealt with this data. So Kofi, do you want to call out yourself on anything?
I think there's one thing I can call myself out on, which is that it's not that it's a chart crime per se, but I think it is misleading when people open up a site like BundleBear and they see that there have been 30 million user ops, and then it makes it, I guess it kind of conveys the impression that like, wow, there's already so much great usage and this stuff already has product market fit, when if you look at, what are those accounts actually doing, like I did in my half-year report, you'll see that a lot of the accounts that are active are like, maybe they make one user op in their entire lives and they never get used again. So it's hard. It's sort of like the big numbers are correct. They're not wrong, but it can be slightly misleading if you don't add the context of how many of these accounts are actually doing stuff consistently and how many of them are just somebody did a one-off and then, maybe they don't even remember that they have an account on that app and they just abandoned it for the rest of days,
That's a very reflected take. It's like, are you building the dashboard for the CEO and do the numbers lead to look good, or are you building it for the product manager who is actually like, whose job is at stake if this doesn't get adoption? So yeah, with that, I think we have completed all the topics that we wanted to talk about on this episode. Kofi, thanks so much for all your contributions to the data space, for bearing the flag of the freelancers, for building with you and for building all of this cool stuff. And thanks for coming on the podcast, of course. Thanks for listening to the Index podcast. We will see you. No, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I have one last comment. Kofi, I worry about your safety, and I think your fire alarm is screaming for help, so you might want to buy a battery.
Yeah, I should actually do that. I mean, I'm at home right now.
So that's,
get my friends to buy a battery for their fire alarm, because you're right, it is squeaking. I don't even notice it because it's doing it constantly, which is bad. Yeah.
That's a hilarious note to end the podcast on. Thanks for listening to the Index podcast. We'll catch you again in 2 weeks with a yet to be decided topic. As always, feedback is appreciated. Tell your friends about our podcast, and see you soon. Bye bye.
Crypto data wizards, come join us for the parade. From Bitcoin ETF to Solana meme coin trade, uncovering public secrets in the blockchain shade. Bad chiller, cherry picking liar. We call them out and set chart crime on fire.